April 8, 1943. High above the contested skies of Caen, France, at 27,000 feet. Oberleutnant Ralph Hermansen, a seasoned ace of Jagdgeschwader 26, found it difficult to conceal his amusement. Through the pristine canopy of his Focke-Wulf 190A5, he observed the laborious ascent of unfamiliar shapes towards his formation. These American newcomers, making their combat debut over occupied Europe, struck him as almost comical. "The Amis have sent us flying milk bottles," he radioed to his wingman, a chuckle escaping him at the sight of the Republic P-47 Thunderbolts, struggling to gain altitude. Below, a formation of 16 P-47C Thunderbolts from the 4th Fighter Group clawed skyward. Their immense 2,000-horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engines strained against an imposing 7-ton airframe. To German pilots, accustomed to the elegant Spitfires and agile Soviet Yaks, these American behemoths appeared almost absurd. Their barrel-like fuselages, prominent bubble canopies, wings that seemed disproportionately small, and propellers of unprecedented size in the Luftwaffe's inventory made them an object of mirth. What Hermansen and his fellow German pilots couldn't possibly fathom was that they were witnessing the dawn of a new era in air combat. These flying milk bottles were, in fact, the vanguard of the machine that would systematically dismantle the Luftwaffe's fighter arm. In less than 18 months, these derided aircraft would become instruments of terror, their .850 caliber Browning machine guns, a sound German pilots would learn to dread above all others. The sheer destructive power was undeniable, packed into those robust wings. 3,400 rounds of ammunition, delivering a combined rate of fire of 6,000 rounds per minute, enough concentrated firepower to slice a Messerschmitt in two in under 2 seconds. The shift began that very April morning. Major Donald Blakesley, leading the 335th Fighter Squadron, spotted the German formation positioning for attack. A former Eagle Squadron veteran who had recently transitioned from RAF Spitfires, Blakesley understood a truth his men hadn't yet grasped. Survival in the P-47 demanded a complete reevaluation of everything they knew about air combat. The Thunderbolt represented a radical departure from conventional fighter design. While German engineers favored lightweight interceptors optimized for climb and turn, Republic Aviation crafted an unprecedented high-altitude juggernaut. It harnessed mass, raw power, and overwhelming firepower to redefine aerial warfare. Alexander Kartveli, Republic Aviation's Georgian-born chief designer, received urgent specifications in June 1940, amidst the fall of France. The U.S. Army Air Corps needed a high-altitude interceptor to rival the Luftwaffe's finest. What Kartveli delivered instead was a dinosaur, as he himself put it, but a dinosaur with good proportions. The XP-47B prototype's maiden flight on May 6, 1941, astonished observers. Weighing 9,900 pounds empty, it was 65% heavier than its predecessor, the P-43 Lancer. Its massive turbo-supercharger system, with intricate ducting snaking through the rear fuselage, gave it an almost bulbous profile. Test pilots, encountering it for the first time, often asked with incredulity, "This thing actually flies?" Not only did it fly, but it excelled at altitude. The 18-cylinder Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine, generating 2,000 horsepower, could maintain full power at 27,000 feet, an altitude where German engines struggled for oxygen. The exhaust gas-driven turbo supercharger delivered sea-level performance in the rarefied stratosphere. Major Hubert Hub Zemke, commanding the 56th Fighter Group, initially viewed the aircraft with disdain. His unit suffered 18 pilot fatalities and lost 41 aircraft in training accidents between September 1942 and January 1943. The P-47 claimed more American lives in training than Germans would in its initial months of combat. It had a propensity to ground loop on landing, torque roll violently on takeoff, and dive so enthusiastically that pilots encountered compressibility, experiencing control surfaces locking up as shock waves formed on the wings. Yet those who mastered it discovered something extraordinary. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a future ace with 27 victories, described his first flight. It was like strapping yourself to a locomotive. The power was unbelievable. You didn't fly it, you aimed it. The initial combat engagements in April and May 1943 seemed to confirm every German prejudice. P-47s couldn't outturn Focke-Wulf 190s, struggled to climb with Messerschmitt 109s, and lacked the nimble handling of German fighters at medium altitudes. Luftwaffe pilots swiftly developed tactics to exploit these weaknesses, attacking from below where the heavy Thunderbolts were less responsive and forcing turning engagements where agility trumped sheer power. Hauptmann Josef Pips Priller, commanding Jagdgeschwader 26, reported to headquarters after his first encounter. "The new American fighter is ripe for the picking. It flies like a truck, turns like a freight train, and climbs like a pregnant cow. Our boys are calling them jabos, fat targets masquerading as warriors." Statistics appeared to support German confidence. In their first month, American fighter groups lost 14 Thunderbolts for only 3 confirmed German kills. The RAF, observing from their Spitfire squadrons, even half-jokingly suggested Americans might reconsider their choice of aircraft. But beneath the surface, something significant was occurring that German intelligence failed to fully grasp. The P-47s that were shot down consistently absorbed astonishing amounts of damage before succumbing. One aircraft returned from a May 4th mission riddled with 21 cannon holes and over 100 machine gun strikes, damage that would have disintegrated a Messerschmitt or Spitfire. The robust radial engine, devoid of vulnerable liquid cooling systems, shrugged off hits that would have crippled a liquid-cooled fighter. Crucially, when P-47s did bring their guns to bear, the results were devastating. The Thunderbolt's concentrated battery created a zone of destruction unlike anything German pilots had experienced. Unlike the rifle-caliber weapons of earlier warfighters or the limited ammunition of cannons, the American fighter could sustain fire for over 30 seconds, an eternity in a dogfight. The pivotal event that began to alter German perceptions occurred on June 26, 1943, over Le Touquet, France. It involved Second Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron, and an encounter that would resonate through both air forces. Johnson's formation of 48 P-47s returning from escort duty was ambushed by 16 Focke-Wulf 190s from 2 Jagdgeschwader 26, led by Hauptmann Wilhelm Ferdinand Wutz Galland. The Germans executed a flawless attack, diving from the sun with a commanding speed advantage. Johnson's Thunderbolt at the rear of the formation was caught in a lethal crossfire. 2 20mm cannon shells ripped across his aircraft. The canopy disintegrated, hydraulic fluid sprayed into the cockpit, the engine cowling tore away, and fire erupted behind the instrument panel. Wounded by shrapnel, Johnson attempted to bail out, only to find his canopy jammed shut by a 20mm shell explosion in the track. He was trapped in a dying aircraft at 27,000 feet. What transpired next defied all assumptions about combat damage. Despite zero forward visibility through an oil-smeared windscreen, a violently shaking engine barely functioning, and controls that responded intermittently, Johnson somehow leveled the aircraft and pointed it toward England. The P-47, against all odds, continued to fly with damage that would have reduced any other fighter to scattered debris. Then a lone Focke-Wulf 190, its pilot unidentified to this day, discovered the crippled Thunderbolt, limping across the channel at a mere 170 miles per hour. The German pilot positioned himself behind Johnson's P-47 and emptied his 4 20mm cannons and 2 13mm machine guns into it. Johnson, unable to maneuver, could only huddle behind his armor plate. The Thunderbolt absorbed the entire cannon load. The German then repositioned and fired again, this time with only his machine guns. Finally, with ammunition exhausted, the German pilot pulled alongside. Johnson clearly saw his young, blonde face, his expression shifting from confidence to confusion, and then to something bordering on awe. Shaking his head in apparent amazement, the German offered an informal salute and peeled away. Johnson's P-47 crash-landed at Manston. Ground crew stopped counting bullet holes after 200. A cannon shell had exploded inches from his head. Another detonated against the armor plate behind his seat. The engine had taken direct hits. Control cables were partially severed, and 3 of the 4 main longerons, the fuselage's structural backbone, were shot through. Yet, the aircraft had brought him home. The survival of Johnson's Thunderbolt sent shockwaves through both air forces. American engineers, examining the wreckage, realized they had underestimated their own creation. German intelligence, receiving combat reports from Jagdgeschwader 26, initially dismissed them as impossible, but multiple pilot testimonies confirmed the unbelievable. The Thunderbolt had absorbed everything the Luftwaffe's premier fighter could deliver, and lived. By July 1943, American pilots were rapidly learning the P-47's true strengths. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zemke, the 56th Fighter Group commander, had unlocked its secret through relentless trial and error. Don't turn with them. Don't climb with them at low altitude. Use your weight. Use your power. Use your guns. The Thunderbolt's immense weight, initially a perceived handicap, became a formidable weapon. In a dive, nothing could catch it. From 30,000 feet, a P-47 could reach 550 miles per hour, exceeding the speed of any German fighter, even in a vertical dive. This speed could then be converted into a soaring zoom climb, leaving pursuers far behind. Captain Walter "Bud" Mahurin, one of America's first aces in Europe, pioneered what became known as the boom and zoom tactic. Instead of traditional dogfights, P-47 formations would climb to 30,000 feet, an altitude where German fighters operated less effectively. Spotting Luftwaffe formations below, the Thunderbolts would roll inverted and dive, achieving speeds that made deflection shooting nearly impossible for the Germans. At the bottom of these terrifying dives, the American heavy machine guns would unleash their destructive power. German pilots who survived these encounters described it as facing a wall of lead. The concentrated firepower disintegrated aircraft caught in its path. The true revelation of American firepower emerged during the August 17, 1943 dual raid on Schweinfurt and Regensburg, the deepest penetration into Germany to that date. This mission starkly demonstrated both the P-47's initial range limitations, even with drop tanks, and its terrifying effectiveness when deployed correctly. Major David Schilling, leading the 62nd Fighter Squadron, encountered a formation of Messerschmitt 110 destroyer aircraft, specialized bomber killers, positioning to attack the B-17s. Schilling's flight of 4 Thunderbolts initiated their attack dive from 28,000 feet. Unteroffizier Heinrich Roth, a gunner in one of the Me-110s who survived, later recounted in a POW interrogation, "The American fighters descended like hammers from heaven. I opened fire at 800 meters. Good hits. I saw them strike the fighter's wing. The P-47 didn't even wobble. Then he fired. The aircraft ahead of us simply came apart. Not shot down, but utterly destroyed. Wings separated from the fuselage, tail severed, the crew compartment shredded into metal confetti. In 2 seconds, an Me-110 ceased to exist. 8 Messerschmitt 109s and 110s were annihilated in less than a minute. German pilots had never experienced such concentrated firepower. Each P-47 carried 425 rounds per gun, totaling 3,400 rounds, weighing nearly 900 pounds. At a typical convergence distance of 300 yards, all 8 guns' ballistic paths intersected in a zone approximately 6 feet in diameter. Anything within that zone faced 150 caliber projectiles per second, each traveling at 2,900 feet per second. The sheer volume of ammunition was a testament to American industrial might. While German fighters typically carried limited cannon ammunition, 120 to 200 rounds for a 20mm weapon, American pilots could sustain fire for over half a minute. The standard combat load mixed armor-piercing incendiary tracer, and standard ball ammunition in patterns designed for both destruction and ignition. Lieutenant Colonel Francis "Gabby" Gabreski, who would become the top American ace in Europe with 28 victories, described the effect. "When you hit them with all 8, they don't just go down, they explode. I saw a 109 literally cut in half, the tail falling one way, the nose and wings another. The pilot never knew what hit him." By September 1943, the Luftwaffe was confronting another grim reality about the P-47. Its performance dramatically improved with altitude, while German fighters suffered. The turbo-supercharged double Wasp engine maintained its rated power up to 30,000 feet. German fighters, relying on single- or two-stage mechanical superchargers, saw their performance degrade significantly above 25,000 feet. Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, a German ace with 206 victories, met his fatal end on October 8, 1943. Leading Jagdgeschwader 1 against a B-17 formation at 28,000 feet over Bremen, Philipp found his Focke-Wulf 190A6 sluggish and unresponsive in the thin air. The BMW 801 engine, powerful at medium altitudes, was gasping for oxygen nearly 6 miles above the Earth. When P-47s of the 56th Fighter Group dove on his formation from 32,000 feet, the German fighters were easy prey. Robert Johnson, now an accomplished combat pilot, was flying at 31,000 feet when he spotted Philipp's distinctive Focke-Wulf. Johnson's combat report was chillingly direct. Opened fire at 300 yards, 30 degrees deflection, observed strikes along entire fuselage. Enemy aircraft exploded, no parachute observed. Philipp's death sent shockwaves through the Luftwaffe. If one of their finest, a veteran of over 500 combat missions, could not survive against the Thunderbolts, what hope did average pilots have? The German High Command ordered an immediate investigation into the P-47's capabilities. The report delivered to Reich Marshal Hermann Göring in November 1943 was stark. The Thunderbolt's service ceiling exceeded 42,000 feet, higher than any German fighter could reach. Its dive speed neared the sound barrier. Its formidable armor included a 3/8-inch steel plate behind the pilot, 1/2-inch bulletproof glass windscreen, and armored deflection plates around the engine. Most disturbingly, its rugged construction allowed it to absorb damage that would annihilate 3 conventional fighters and still return home. In January 1944, a new variant of the P-47 began arriving in England, completing its transformation from a source of mockery to a nightmare. The P-47 D-22 featured a Hamilton standard hydraulic propeller with massive, 13-foot diameter paddle blades. The improvement in climb rate was immediate and dramatic. Where earlier Thunderbolts climbed at an anemic 2,200 feet per minute at sea level, the paddle blade variants could achieve 3,000 feet per minute, matching or exceeding German fighters at most altitudes. The immense propeller also enhanced acceleration, allowing P-47s to build energy faster in level flight. Hauptmann Heinz Knoke of Jagdgeschwader 11, a veteran of over 200 combat missions, encountered these new variants in February 1944. He wrote in his combat diary, "The fat American fighters have learned to climb. We bounced a formation near Hanover, expecting our usual advantage. They turned into us and climbed with us. When we tried to disengage, they followed us up to 30,000 feet. Schmidt was caught and blown apart. Nothing left but smoke and fragments. These are not the same machines we laughed at last year." The paddle blade propeller did more than improve performance. It changed the very sound of the Thunderbolt. The distinctive, thundering roar, created by the blade tips approaching supersonic speeds, could be heard for miles. German ground troops reported being able to identify approaching P-47s by sound alone, a deep, threatening rumble that heralded death from above. They began calling it Donnerschlag, thunderclap. By March 1944, P-47s equipped with external fuel tanks could escort bombers deep into Germany. The standard configuration carried 2 108-gallon wing tanks or a 75-gallon belly tank, extending range to over 1,000 miles. With the paddle blade propeller providing improved performance even when loaded, Thunderbolts could engage in combat on equal terms immediately after dropping their tanks. The Luftwaffe's desperate response was to concentrate on the bombers, hoping to inflict enough losses to halt the American daylight campaign. But this required penetrating the P-47 escort screen, an increasingly suicidal endeavor. German pilots developed a grudging respect, bordering on fear, for the big American fighters. Major Günther Rahl, one of Germany's top aces with 275 victories, survived a harrowing encounter with P-47s on March 6, 1944, that left him severely wounded. He later recalled, "We saw them above us, fat silhouettes against the sun. Someone laughed and said, 'Here come the flying pigs.' Nobody was laughing 30 seconds later. They came down like an avalanche, faster than we could react. The first pass destroyed 3 of our fighters, just gone, transformed into burning debris. Their guns didn't fire in bursts like ours. They poured out solid streams of fire. Getting caught in that stream meant instant death. The escort missions revealed another P-47 advantage: endurance. While German fighters operated at maximum power settings that rapidly consumed fuel, the big American radials could cruise efficiently at high altitude. Thunderbolts could remain with the bombers for hours, rotating top cover while maintaining enough fuel for combat and return. As more P-51 Mustangs arrived to assume long-range escort duties in spring 1944, P-47 units increasingly shifted their focus to ground attack, a role that would establish them as the most feared aircraft in the German arsenal. This transition began in earnest in April 1944, as the Allies prepared for the invasion of France. The Thunderbolt's heavy machine gun battery proved equally effective against ground targets. The standard armor-piercing incendiary ammunition could penetrate the top armor of most German vehicles, while the sheer volume of fire could obliterate soft targets in seconds. A 2-second burst delivered 160 half-inch projectiles into a target area the size of a truck. But it was the integration of bombs and rockets that truly transformed the P-47 into a multi-role monster. The D-25 variant could carry two 1,000-pound bombs under the wings and a 500-pounder under the fuselage, a bomb load equal to early war medium bombers. Later variants added zero-length rocket stubs for 10 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, HVARs, each equivalent to a 105mm artillery shell. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment during the Normandy campaign, experienced P-47 ground attacks firsthand. They came in low, so low you could see the pilots' faces. The sound was terrifying. Engines roaring, rockets screaming, then the hammer of those heavy machine guns. A column of our trucks simply ceased to exist. 20 vehicles transformed into burning wreckage in one pass. The psychological effect on the men was devastating. They called them Jabos, fighter bombers. But these were something beyond that. They were flying artillery with the accuracy of snipers. On June 6, 1944, the Luftwaffe confronted the complete shift in air power dynamics. Over 500 P-47s provided air cover for the invasion, establishing an impenetrable umbrella over the beaches. German fighters attempting to reach the landing zones were decimated. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer of Jagdgeschwader II, one of only 3 German pilots to reach the beaches that day, reported, "The sky belonged to the Americans. Thunderbolts were stacked from sea level to 30,000 feet. We tried to break through at dawn. 12 fighters from our group. I was the only one to return. The P-47s were waiting at every altitude. You couldn't climb over them, couldn't dive under them. Their guns turned our fighters into aluminum rain." In the weeks following D-Day, P-47s systematically paralyzed German daylight movement. The statistics were staggering. In June alone, 9th Air Force Thunderbolts claimed 651 locomotives, 3,847 trucks, 512 tanks and armored vehicles, and 4,553 horse-drawn vehicles destroyed. The Wehrmacht was forced to move only at night, severely hindering their ability to respond to Allied advances. While devastating Europe, the P-47 was simultaneously proving its worth in the Pacific theater. The 348th Fighter Group, operating from New Guinea, found the Thunderbolt's qualities perfectly suited to the vast distances and harsh conditions of the Pacific War. Colonel Neil Kirby, commanding the 348th, developed specialized tactics. On October 11, 1943, Kirby led 4 P-47s against 40 Japanese aircraft over Wewak, personally shooting down 6 enemy planes in a single mission, earning him the Medal of Honor. The Japanese, accustomed to engaging nimble but fragile American fighters, were unprepared for the P-47's combination of firepower and durability. Japanese ace Saburo Sakai, who encountered P-47s over New Guinea, later wrote, "We called them monsters. Our 20mm cannon, which could destroy a P-40 with a few hits, seemed to have no effect. I put dozens of rounds into one Thunderbolt and watched it fly away. Their return fire was terrifying. Streams of heavy bullets that tore aircraft apart." The P-47N, specifically developed for the Pacific, featured increased fuel capacity with wet wings holding 93 gallons each, extending its range to 2,350 miles. This variant would eventually escort B-29s to Japan, demonstrating how the initially short-legged fighter of 1943 had evolved into a true long-range weapon. Perhaps the ultimate vindication of the P-47's evolution came in its encounters with German jet fighters. The Messerschmitt Me 262, with its 540 miles/hour top speed, should have been untouchable by propeller-driven fighters. But Thunderbolt pilots discovered they could intercept jets in two critical situations: during takeoff and landing, when jets were most vulnerable, and in high-speed dives from altitude. On November 27, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel John C. Pappy Herbst of the 352nd Fighter Group became one of the first pilots to shoot down an Me 262 with a P-47. Diving from 28,000 feet, Herbst's Thunderbolt reached speeds approaching 500 miles per hour, fast enough to catch the jet in level flight. The jet pilot, confident in his speed advantage, never saw the diving P-47 until Herbst's guns opened up at 400 yards. Herbst's combat report noted, "The enemy aircraft disintegrated under fire. Large pieces, including both engines, separated from the fuselage. The pilot did not escape. The concentrated fire of 850 caliber guns proved more effective than we anticipated against jet aircraft." By early 1945, specialized P-47M variants were deployed specifically to counter German jets and V-1 flying bombs. With water methanol injection boosting power to 2,800 horsepower and refined aerodynamics, these ultimate Thunderbolts could reach 470 miles per hour in level flight at 30,000 feet, fast enough to intercept jets under certain conditions. Major George Bostick, commanding the 63rd Fighter Squadron equipped with P-47Ms, shot down two Me-262s in March 1945. His tactical report emphasized firepower over speed. "The jets are faster, but they can't turn and they can't take punishment. One good burst from our battery, and they come apart like they're made of paper. They have to slow down to attack bombers. That's when we get them." The ultimate demonstration of American industrial might unfolded during Operation Bodenplatte, the Luftwaffe's desperate attempt to obliterate Allied air power on January 1, 1945. Nearly 900 German fighters, including their best remaining pilots, launched surprise attacks on Allied airfields across Belgium and the Netherlands. At Y-34 airfield near Metz, home to the 365th Fighter Group's P-47s, the attack initially succeeded. German fighters destroyed 22 Thunderbolts on the ground, along with several other aircraft. A captured German pilot brought to the command post pointed at the burning aircraft and taunted, "What do you think of that?" Major George Brookings' response became legendary throughout the 9th Air Force. He gestured toward the flight line, where ground crews were already clearing damaged aircraft and preparing hard stands for replacements. "By tomorrow, we'll have 40 new ones. How long will it take you to replace your pilots?" The German pilot's smirk vanished. Within 48 hours, factory-fresh P-47 D-40s filled the flight line, flown in from depots in England. The Luftwaffe lost 271 aircraft and 213 pilots in Bodenplatte, including many irreplaceable instructors and squadron leaders, losses they could never recover. The Americans lost 134 aircraft across all attacked airfields, all replaced within a week. The numbers painted a clear picture of inevitable defeat. Republic Aviation produced 15,683 P-47s during the war, more than any other American fighter. At peak production, the Farmingdale factory on Long Island completed one Thunderbolt every hour around the clock. The Evansville plant in Indiana, built from empty farmland in 1942, was producing 500 aircraft per month by 1944. Each P-47D demanded 65,000 individual parts, 8 miles of electrical wiring, 2,000 pounds of aluminum, and 300 pounds of rubber. The engine alone contained 2,400 individual components machined to tolerances of thousandths of an inch. Yet, American workers, many of them women who had never seen an aircraft before Pearl Harbor, assembled these complex machines with precision that surpassed peacetime standards. Ammunition production was equally staggering. Each P-47 sortie required 3,400 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition. With hundreds of Thunderbolts flying daily missions, ammunition consumption exceeded 10 million rounds per month by mid-1944. The Lake City Arsenal in Missouri, one of several ammunition plants, produced 30 million rounds monthly. Each cartridge was manufactured to exacting tolerances, ensuring reliable feeding through the synchronized gun mechanisms. Fuel consumption was immense. Each Thunderbolt burned 100 gallons per hour in normal flight, up to 300 gallons in combat with water injection engaged. The 9th Air Force alone consumed over 25 million gallons of aviation fuel monthly by late 1944, all shipped across the Atlantic in tankers that were themselves products of American mass production. Even more impressive than aircraft production was pilot training. By 1944, the United States was graduating 30,000 pilots annually from advanced training, exceeding Germany's total training output for the entire war. Each P-47 pilot received a minimum of 400 hours of flight training before entering combat, including 100 hours in advanced fighters. German pilots, by contrast, were entering combat with less than 100 hours total by war's end. This quality was evident in combat. American pilots arrived in Europe highly trained in formation flying, instrument navigation, gunnery, and tactics. They had practiced against captured German aircraft, understanding their enemy's capabilities and limitations. They knew their aircraft systems intimately, having studied technical manuals that German pilots rarely received. Lieutenant Eugene Roberts, arriving in England in September 1944, exemplified the American training advantage. I had 420 hours in my logbook, including 75 hours in the P-47. I'd fired at towed targets, practiced deflection shooting, studied gun camera film from actual combat. My first mission, I knew exactly what to do. The German pilot I faced couldn't have had half my experience. It wasn't even a fair fight. In March 1945, Hauptmann Josef Priller, the same pilot who had ridiculed the P-47s as pregnant cows 2 years prior, was interviewed by German propaganda officials seeking to boost morale. His statement, deemed too demoralizing for publication, laid bare the complete shift in German attitudes. The Thunderbolt is the best fighter-bomber ever built. Its firepower is unprecedented. Weapons that never jam, never overheat, never run out of ammunition in normal combat. It carries bombs like a medium bomber, fires rockets like artillery, and fights like a fighter when needed. But beyond the machine is what it represents. Unlimited American production. They lose 10, they build 20. We lose 1, it's gone forever. Their pilots arrive better trained than our instructors. They have fuel for training, ammunition for practice, spare parts for everything. We have nothing but courage, and courage without resources is just delayed defeat. We laughed at them in 1943. We're not laughing now. When you hear those guns, you know death has come calling. The sound haunts us. Mechanical, precise, unstoppable. Like everything American, it's about overwhelming material superiority. They didn't beat us through better tactics or braver pilots. They buried us under an avalanche of steel and lead. By April 1945, the Luftwaffe existed mostly on paper. Fuel shortages grounded most aircraft. Experienced pilots were dead or captured. Airfields were cratered ruins. But even with aircraft and fuel, German pilots faced an impossible equation. Attacking meant confronting P-47 formations that controlled every altitude from ground level to 40,000 feet. Feldwebel Klaus Brettschneider, one of the last German pilots trained in 1945, flew exactly one combat mission before the war ended. His encounter with P-47s over Leipzig lasted 12 seconds. I saw them diving from above, 4 Thunderbolts in perfect formation. I tried to turn, but they were too fast. The leader fired from 500 meters. My aircraft shook like it was hit by sledgehammers. The engine exploded. The wings separated. I barely escaped. In the parachute, I watched them destroy my entire staffel. 6 fighters gone in under a minute. The sky rained burning aluminum and bodies. The psychological impact was profound. German pilots developed what medical officers termed Yabo fever, physical symptoms of stress appearing when Thunderbolts were reported in the area. Veterans who had faced Spitfires and Hurricanes without fear became physically ill before missions against P-47s. The distinctive thunder of approaching Thunderbolts caused panic among ground troops, who knew survival meant immediate cover. The final statistics of P-47 operations are staggering. In Europe, 3,752 German aircraft destroyed in aerial combat. 3,315 aircraft destroyed on the ground. 86,000 railway cars destroyed, 9,000 locomotives destroyed, 6,000 armored fighting vehicles destroyed, 68,000 trucks destroyed, 60,000 horse-drawn vehicles destroyed. In the Pacific, 697 Japanese aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, 150 aircraft destroyed on the ground, 1,500 vehicles destroyed, 150 locomotives destroyed, countless barges, ships, and installations. The 9th Air Force alone, primarily equipped with P-47s, flew 230,873 combat sorties, dropped 120,000 tons of bombs, fired 135 million rounds of ammunition, and launched 60,000 rockets. Thunderbolt units achieved an aerial combat kill ratio of 4.6-1, all while maintaining the lowest loss rate of any Allied fighter bomber. Behind these numbers lay a profound human cost. The Luftwaffe lost approximately 28,000 pilots killed in combat against Western Allied forces. Many fell to the concentrated fire of American heavy machine guns. Each loss represented years of training that Germany could never replace. By war's end, the average German fighter pilot had less than 30 hours of combat experience. The average P-47 pilot had over 200. At the Luftwaffe interrogation center at Oberursel, captured Allied pilots were debriefed. Records seized in 1945 revealed German assessments of Allied aircraft. The file on the P-47, continuously updated throughout the war, showed a complete reversal of opinion. April 1943, large, unmaneuverable fighter, inferior to German types in all performance parameters except dive speed. Machine gun armament insufficient against cannon-armed fighters. Assessment, minimal threat. December 1943, exceptional high-altitude performance. Extreme structural strength, firepower increasingly problematic, pilots showing improved tactics. Assessment, significant threat above 25,000 feet. June 1944, dominant fighter bomber, superior to all German types above 20,000 feet. Firepower devastating against all target types. Structural strength makes shoot-down extremely difficult. Assessment, critical threat at all altitudes. March 1945, best fighter bomber of the war. Combination of firepower, durability, and performance unmatched. Pilot quality exceptional. Assessment, unsurvivable in direct engagement. In 1985, at a reunion of German and American fighter pilots in Phoenix, Arizona, former adversaries met in peace. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, former head of the Luftwaffe fighter arm, was asked about the P-47. His response, captured on video, articulated the complete transformation. "We made a terrible mistake in 1943. We saw this big, heavy fighter and laughed. The Americans don't understand air combat," we said. "They built a bomber and called it a fighter. We were the ones who didn't understand. The Americans didn't try to build a European fighter. They built an American one, designed around production, firepower, and survivability. They understood that in a war of attrition, the plane that could take punishment and deliver devastating firepower would win." They were right. The first time I flew a captured P-47 after the war, I understood everything. The power was incredible. It climbed like it was falling upward. The cockpit was comfortable, the visibility excellent, the controls precise. It was a pilot's aircraft wrapped in armor. But what really impressed me was realizing that America built over 15,000 of these complex machines while fighting a two-ocean war. Each one required an engine more complex than anything Germany produced. Yet they built them faster than we could build simple fighters. That's when I knew we never had a chance. Those guns. We called them Roosevelt's piano because of the sound they made. Once you heard that sound, you never forgot it. Many of my friends heard it for the last time. The P-47 didn't just defeat the Luftwaffe, it destroyed it. The P-47's design perfectly encapsulated American industrial philosophy. Brute force engineering backed by unlimited resources. Every component was overbuilt, overpowered, and over-engineered. The wing spars could support 40,000 pounds, 3 times the aircraft's loaded weight. The engine mount could withstand 12 grams forces. The control cables were doubled throughout, with automatic backup systems. The ammunition feed system alone was an engineering marvel. 8 separate ammunition boxes, each holding 425 rounds, fed through electric boost motors to prevent jamming during high-G maneuvers. The guns were electrically heated to prevent freezing at altitude. Each gun had its own charging mechanism and could be individually synchronized. The convergence was adjustable from 150 to 400 yards, allowing pilots to optimize for their preferred engagement range. Even after the war, some German veterans maintained that the P-47 won through sheer quantity, not intrinsic quality, that German fighters were technically superior but overwhelmed by numbers. However, combat records paint a different picture. In engagements where numbers were equal, P-47s consistently prevailed. The heavy machine gun armament, initially dismissed as inferior to cannon, proved more effective in actual combat. Analysis of gun camera footage revealed why. Cannon shells, while individually more destructive, required precise aim and had limited ammunition. The P-47's weapons created a probability cloud of bullets that ensured hits even with imperfect aim. At typical engagement ranges, a 2-second burst put at least 20 rounds into a fighter-sized target, more than enough to ensure destruction. The ammunition itself was superior. American .50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary rounds utilized a delayed-action fuse that guaranteed penetration before detonation. The incendiary compound burned at 3,000 degrees F, hot enough to ignite aluminum structures. German 20mm shells, though heavier, often exploded on surface contact, causing spectacular but sometimes superficial damage. The P-47 Thunderbolt remains the heaviest single-engine piston fighter ever mass-produced. Its empty weight of 10,000 pounds exceeded the gross weight of some twin-engine fighters. Its engine produced more power than entire bomber formations from the previous war. Its weapons delivered more firepower than an infantry squad. Yet it was built by the thousands, flown by young men barely out of high school, and maintained under combat conditions by mechanics who learned their trade in mere weeks. The transformation of German opinion from mockery to terror occurred in less than 2 years. In that brief period, the flying milk bottle became the most feared aircraft in the Luftwaffe's experience. Veterans who had faced Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Soviet Yaks without flinching spoke of P-47s in hushed tones decades after the war. At the United States Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, a restored P-47D stands among other legendary fighters. Its placard lists specifications and battle honors. But the true story is powerfully conveyed by a small display case containing spent .50 caliber shells and a strip of gun camera film showing a Focke-Wulf 990 disintegrating under fire. Below the display, a quote from an unnamed German pilot from a 1945 interrogation report. "We laughed when we first saw them. Fat, ugly American fighters that couldn't turn, couldn't climb, couldn't fight. We stopped laughing when we realized they didn't need to turn or climb. They just pointed those guns at you and you ceased to exist. The laughter died with our comrades." The P-47 Thunderbolt entered combat as an object of derision and ended the war as an instrument of annihilation. In between, 8 synchronized Browning machine guns rewrote the rules of aerial warfare and buried the Luftwaffe under an avalanche of lead. German pilots had laughed at the ungainly American fighter in April 1943. By May 1945, there were no German pilots left to laugh. The thunder had spoken, and the skies belonged to America.